All right, I get the honor of just kind of moving us through to the next panelists. We have Dina Morrow. She's the chair for the Commission on Accreditation for the Council on Social Work Education. You know, I always like to highlight the practice experience. This is a field education town hall. You guys are the unsung heroes of the pandemic, and I know you like to know these, like Darla was speaking of earlier. These folks have been social workers, and they practice, and they are very have sung the praises of field education since I started working with them last year. I think it's impressive that Dr. Morrow is a licensed independent clinical social worker. I know that she's been an ally of the University of South Carolina because I remember when she was at Winthrop as the chair of their social work program. And so it's really been an honor to get to work with her as the chair on the Commission on Accreditation. But currently she's also in the role of director at the West Virginia University School of Social Work. So she is going to be a panelist, and she is our chair of the Commission on Accreditation. If we can move to the next slide. We're going to introduce Deborah McPhee, who is also the chair on the Commission on Educational Policy. I think the important point to make is that the Commission on Educational Policy and the Commission on Accreditation have chosen to work together towards the draft of EPAS 2022. Deborah is actually someone I communicate with regularly. Our Council on Field Education, actually falls underneath the Commission on Educational Policy. And she has been an advocate for what, and so has Dina, or Dean Morrow has, for Correct. Field education issues. You both have been strong advocates for that. I know that Dr. McPhee has more than 20 years of professional and executive leadership skill. She was a dean previously, I believe it was Barry University, right, Deborah? And has come back and is at Fordham now, which has one of the largest programs. But she has extensive experience in executive leadership as well as a clinical practitioner. And she is currently our chair of the Commission on Educational Policy. We thank you both so much for being here. I get to turn it over to you as you go through and review those changes. Before we do that though, I would encourage everyone that's watching, if you have a double screen or another screen you can pull up, and I don't know if Karen, you can paste this in the chat box, but there is a wonderful link, and this is what Darla was speaking to earlier, is that you could pull up that evaluation, and along with their talking through the changes to EPAS, you actually could, on your own, or take notes about what things you might want to provide input on formally in that evaluation, because it's great that you're going to do a question and answer now. We're going to provide this opportunity, but we also want to capture in written form what your feedback is going to be on each of these changes from 2015 to 2022 curriculum. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dina and Deborah. Thank you again so much for being here.
Melissa, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Melissa. Yes. And we want to thank as well all of COPE for putting together this session today. We have close to 400 participants, and so that is amazing. And I want to thank Darla Spence-Coffey as well, who wonderfully set a context that accreditation really is a shared process across the social work education community. And so with Deborah and I having a chance to share with you the first draft of the EPAS 2022, I think that Darla's words of "it takes a village" are very true. So as we share with you, and hopefully as you follow along, and we encourage you to do that with the actual draft itself, I think we have that on the chat box. If not, maybe someone could post the link for that in the chat box so you can follow along on the draft. And of course, we've got the slides there as well. But we're reminded that field education is the engine that makes social work education run. And I can't think of any greater unsung heroes during this past year plus of the pandemic than field education colleagues. It's because of you that we now have greater innovation in field than we've ever had before. And it's because of you that you are able to move students through field education with integrity and in quality fashion, and allow for them to be able to graduate on time. So you are truly the heroes in our field for the pandemic time that we've all been struggling our way through. So let me just pause with that and turn it over to Deborah for a few words, and then she'll get us started.
Thanks, Dina. And I want to also, of course, extend my thanks to everyone at CSWE for putting this, helping put this together, and certainly to Melissa's incredible leadership with Kofi. Kofi is, as she said, a council that works very closely with the Commission on Educational Policy. And I've had the privilege of sharing and being part of and chairing the Commission on Educational Policy for the last 6 years or so. And the strengthening of the relationships between the Commission and the councils has been really critical. And I've got the great privilege of working with a couple of chairs at COFI. All of them have been terrific, and all of them have contributed to the advancement of educational policy in really important ways. And I would want to thank you for having us here today, because I can't tell you how important this feedback is. Dina and I have done a couple of sessions on, by no means going to be the last, but really can't stress enough how important it is to get your feedback so that each iteration is representative of people across the spectrum. I also want to agree that the folks in field have really, and they always have, sort of been leaders of curriculum and been leaders of programs, but if this past year certainly has demonstrated that in incredible ways. So thank you for everything you've all done. And thanks for joining us here today. And we really look forward to your feedback. Thanks to everyone. Thank Julie and Marilyn and folks at CSWE for always supporting both of the commissions. So we'll talk a little bit about how the commissions are working together, and we'll sort of go as quickly as we can to get through some of the highlights of the changes that we've seen, that we've proposed rather in the EPAS, and then really look forward to getting into questions and your feedback. So as folks have already indicated, the Commission on Educational Policy, of course, is responsible for one of the main responsibilities for revising within 7-year timeframes the educational policy. And the Commission on Accreditation, of course, is responsible for the standards. We have developed over the last few years a joint committee representative of both commissions, as well as Melissa pointed out, research, et cetera. A couple of other folks have joined us. And it really has been a group effort to put out this first draft, and it by no means will be the last draft. But in this first round, I would say that I'm going to say a little bit about the Commission on Educational Policy, obviously, because they've been my close colleagues and really have worked tremendously over the last several years. Their job has really been environmental scanning, professional sectors, interdisciplinary work to really bring us to the proposals that they put forward around the changes in the EPAS. I would say for EPAS 2022, their priorities have really been to make sure that this next EPAS is relevant to a changing world and really serves programs for the remainder of the decade, which no one knows what will bring, but change is inevitable. That we really prioritize in this EPAS anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that it's future-oriented and responsive and reflective of evolving national and global context. We really, from the Commission's perspective, really want to facilitate programs' ability to be innovative and emphasize function over prescriptive structures, meaning sort of recognizing that there are different ways for education and operational models rather to demonstrate competency and academic excellence. we've really wanted to place student learning and student experience and outcomes at the center of both the explicit and the implicit curriculum, and really want to encourage programs, greater participation and input, or continuous input, from the professional practice sector. So those have been the priorities that guided the work over the last several years of COPE, and hopefully you'll see that represented in the draft. But you guys, you'll be the judges of that. So general changes. Dean and I are going to walk through the highlights, if you will. The joint commission, or the joint committee rather, has really been focused on making sure that this draft we're trying to be straightforward and clear and have a manageable educational policy and standards. You will find in the documents links for definitions, and there will be an enhanced glossary offered as well. So that was introduced with 2015, and we will continue that with 2022. General highlights, general changes you'll see is certainly a strong commitment to anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, both in the competencies and the implicit and the explicit curriculum. The relevance, as we said, of the EPAS to the context, racial justice, the pandemic have really influenced the work. That it's straightforward and clear and manageable, both the EP and the standards. Field education certainly has been a major priority, and hopefully incorporating the lessons learned from COVID into the next EP. Strengthening human rights-based approach. The Human Rights Committee has been tremendously helpful in that regard. You will see 21 fewer standards than you see in 2015, and that really is that attempt to make it clear and manageable. And you'll see 10 fewer competency-related behaviors than you see in the 2015 EPAS. In 2015, you'll remember probably that there's 5 sections, and we have the Joint Committee has agreed to add a 5th section into the 2022, and that really is 2.0, where we've placed anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion as its own. Really representing an effort to make sure that we're fully addressing racism and white supremacy and other forms of injustice, and really preparing students for anti-racist practice. So that's really what that's taking a prominent place. Let's just walk through. I'm going to walk through quickly the competencies, and we've kept the 9 competencies, but we've made some changes. So I'm going to walk through and just give you the highlights. You'll know that competency 1 is to demonstrate ethical and professional behavior. And here we've really tried to strengthen the language regarding justice and human rights. We've used the anti-racist lens to understand and critique the profession's history. We've changed reflection to recognize and manage personal values. And we've added understand digital technology and its ethical use in practice. Competency 2, please. Thanks. Here you'll see that we've revised the title to make sure that we have engage anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion in practice. We've added ADEI characteristics that shape human experience. We've added racism, oppression, white supremacy, equity, and anti-racist practice. We've added caste, generational status, and legal status to dimensions of diversity. We've added societal and historical roots of injustices, technological exclusions, and anti-racism in cultural humility, anti-cultural humility to the competency behaviors. Competency 3, advance human rights and social, racial, economic, and environmental justice. We've, as you'll see, included racial justice here in the title. Really tried to add articulation of the history of oppression and racism, and added content on dismantling structural racism and oppression. In competency 4, the committee the Joint Committee focused on really wanting to distinguish better competency 4 from competency 9 on evaluation of practice. So you'll see here, so engage practice-informed research and research-informed practice. You'll see that we've added culturally informed and anti-racist approaches to conducting research. We've added content on evaluating and critiquing research, content on developing research questions and hypotheses, content on assessing reliability and validity in research, and content on sharing research findings in ways that are usable to consumers. And a bit of the focus there was to really distinguish expectations at a master's level as opposed to a doctoral level regarding research. And as I said, distinguishing it more clearly from 9. Sorry, Julie, didn't mean to mess you up there. Thanks very much. Competency 5, engage in policy practice. We removed behaviors on identifying social policy as it was similar to other 2 behaviors. We've added content on human rights-based policies, advancing social, economic, racial, and environmental justice. We've added global influences content, and we've added anti-racism content. As I said, we've removed one of the behaviors identifying social policy. And I just want to say that in adding the piece around global influence content, I just want to also thank the tremendous work and input and assistance from a number of other commissions, excuse me, including the Global Commission, Commission on Diversity, Disability. We've really had a lot of input from a lot of different sectors, and it's been a part of the process. It's been really valuable and critical. Okay, competency 6. Engage with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. We've added person and environment content, and recently someone has sort of stressed that we really need to look at person and environment as opposed to person in environments. That's been really helpful feedback already, and making sure that we're really saying what it is we intend. And we've added content about understanding how bias, power, and privilege impact engagement with clients and constituencies. Competency 7, assess individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. And here, for 7 through 9, you'll see some of the same kinds of additions, such as content of person and environment and multidisciplinary theoretical frameworks, that we've added culturally responsive assessment, content on assessment involving a collaborative process of defining problems and contracting, and content about understanding how bias, power, and privilege impact assessment with clients and constituencies. Competency 8, intervene with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. Again, adding person and environment and multidisciplinary theoretical frameworks and culturally responsive intervention. Content again around an assessment involving collaborative process and defining problems and contracting, and content on bias, power, and privilege impacting intervention. And competency 9, evaluate practice with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. We've added again, person and environment, multidisciplinary, anti-racist perspective, and we've removed repetition in competency-related behaviors. And you'll see that in the 21 fewer. You'll see that throughout, hopefully, from the 2015. So Dina, I think Dina's going to pick up the next piece, and then we're going to come back and hopefully really have time to hear your feedback. And one other thing I would just stress is that we're going to collect feedback today, and it's been really valuable, but we also want to encourage folks to go to the survey that you would have all received, because ultimately we're going to really cull all of that data to inform the next round of work with the Joint Committee, in addition to our Connect session. So please do that as well. Thanks very much. Dina?
Thank you, Deborah. Hi, everyone. Hi again. So I'll pick up now, and we'll continue on, talk about the proposed changes in draft 1 to program mission. And so with that, we have added content on an anti-racist perspective, and also on racial and environmental justice as part of the 1.0 values of the profession. Also, we removed the requirement to address the consistency of the program mission with the institutional mission. Given the broadening scope of social work education across the country, especially with online programs, we've realized that in some cases, parts of the program that you may be offering certainly would be centered with the institutional mission. In some cases, it may be a little broader than that. So we've recognized that and removed that requirement. We've also removed the requirement that in addition to delineating the program mission, that you must also delineate program goals. And we did this for a couple of reasons. One is that even though historically we've asked for programs to talk about their program goals in addition to mission, we've never asked programs to assess goals. And many times the goals have been thoughtfully developed, but they're just hanging there and not really being assessed. And in fact, in terms of assessment, we want programs to continue with assessing based on the explicit and the implicit curriculum. And so those really then, the competencies and so on really become what we're assessing more so than programs having to go through the motions of identifying program goals. Okay, next slide. And so Deborah mentioned this before, but adding an entire segment 2.0 on anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we really want to thank the CSWE task force, the anti-racism task force, because their work, their rapid and in-depth work has really been helpful in informing us and really trying to weave anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion across all of the 2022 EPAS. So it's its own separate section now. And so with the 2.0 edition, it conveys a commitment to integrating, and we refer to it sometimes as ADEI, across both the explicit and implicit curriculum. And that's strengthened from 2015, where the diversity content was largely centered in the implicit curriculum. And we'll come back and talk about that more as I continue on. And with the 2.0 ADEI, it fosters an inclusive and equitable learning environment by facilitating discourse around ADEI. This section also identifies and recognizes and for us to train students around the pervasive impact of white supremacy. It fosters knowledge and skills for engaging in anti-racist practice. And it fosters an inclusive approach to addressing student learning needs. And I'll just call your attention specifically to AS 2.0.1 and 2.0.2. That 2.0.1 specific and learn and continuing efforts in the explicit curriculum related to anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then 2.0.2, that the program describes, specific and continuing efforts in the implicit curriculum related to fostering ADEI. Okay, next slide. And then 3.0, the explicit curriculum, this slide focusing on the generalist practice portion of that. So we added the integration of ADEI into the generalist practice description, including an anti-racist and global positionality. 3.0 in the explicit curriculum also addresses andragogy, or adult-focused teaching. It also includes content on recognizing the importance of digital information and technology-supported learning. And this next one is a piece that is an addition in this draft, that the curriculum is informed by the professional practice community. And I think that might be centrally related to the field experience, in that field faculty have the opportunity to engage the professional community through practicum, through internships, field placements. And so it may be engaging with field instructors or field supervisors in agency settings. It might be engaging with your community advisory board or your visiting committee. It could be other avenues as well, but really trying to link the professional practice community, not to defining curricula for us, but to the notion that they inform how we think about curricula and how we're delivering curricular content. And of course, the curriculum in the explicit curriculum continues to integrate classroom and field. And then in the explicit curriculum, the portion on specialized practice continues to build on generalist practice, and it extends and enhances the social work competencies. Now, in this draft, we're doing that a little differently, that compared to 2015 EPAS, the specialized practice curriculum enhanced and extended all 9 social work competencies. In this draft, we're proposing to extend competencies 6 through 9, engage, assess, intervene, and evaluate. And the definition of specialized practice is also slightly revised with this. It's a bit broader in scope and it's holistic, but still allows for program autonomy in determining their own specializations, whether that's advanced generalists, clinical practice, macro, children and families, older adults, and so on. It still preserves that autonomy for programs to specialize in ways that they think is important for graduate education in their school and in their region. The explicit curriculum specialized practice area also extends social work knowledge, values, skills, and cognitive affective processes, and demonstrates an ability to engage, assess, intervene, and evaluate across client populations in this more holistic and extended definition. We also focus in that on a commitment to changing structural inequities and to inform and improve policy, practice, and service delivery. And again, same thing here as in the generalist curriculum. You see that there's an effort here to make a link with the professional practice community. So the curriculum is informed by the professional practice community. Okay, next slide. And then moving into field education, which of course it remains the signature pedagogy under this draft of EPAS 2022. We added human rights principles from a global and national social work ethical codes perspective for advancing social, racial, economic, and environment justice. We added ADEI content. We recognize in this that we need to prepare students for interprofessional practice, including using various forms of technology. And although it's been true, this EPAS more clearly affirms that the field director is an essential contributor to the curricular development, administration, and governance of field education. Now, based on our learning from the adjustments that the Commission on Accreditation made in the 2015 standards during the pandemic, we've certainly learned and recognize now that the demonstration of competencies is not always through in-person contact. Now, for that reason, in this draft, we remove the specifying in-person contact. Now, we've had some feedback about that already, and I'm sure that you all will give us feedback as well. Some people have said there needs to be some condition about that what we might say something like real-time contact, real-time engagement with clients. But you all, I really invite you to help us think about that as experts in the field. We continue to affirm under 3.3 that classroom and field are of equal importance. And I would say that the field hours, if you're looking through the draft itself, the field hours remain the same as in 2015, still 400 for BSW, still 900 for MSW. Okay, next slide. Okay, and I want to really talk about this one a bit, 3.3.7 in field education. And so this is also another lesson learned from the pandemic. that programs, you're not required to, but in this draft, programs may permit placements in organizations where student is also employed. That's whenever the student assignments are directly linked to the social work competencies. Field supervision must be separate and distinct from employment supervision. And I think we may need to be a little more specific on here based on some feedback we're receiving already to clarify that a little more. But that field supervision, the intent is to not just say that field supervision is being lumped into employment supervision, but that there is a separate and distinct supervisory time for the academic supervision of field education. Now, it can be the same supervisor, so long as that person meets the qualifications for being a field supervisor. But some intentional time set aside for the educational aspect of field. Somebody asked a question in one of our sessions, is it okay that students receive pay for their field work? Absolutely, if they're in their employing agency, and for those activities that are part of their agency that then meet your requirements for field education, that's fine. No concerns with that. But we entrust field programs to ensure that students, that the work students are getting credit for field education is work that is directly linked to the social work competencies. We've also tried to put in place in this draft some policies to help support and shore up the concept of field education in places of employment. So one is that then in self-studies, you would write to how you ensure that student assignments are directly linked to social work competencies. And you would write to how you ensure that field supervision is separate and distinct from employment supervision. And then one other requirement in the standards here is that the program needs to have a policy for ensuring that the program assists students in situations in which a student becomes unemployed in the organization, just so that there is a plan in place or a process for how you would work with a student who, for whatever reasons, is no longer employed in their employing organization. Okay, next slide. 4.0, the implicit curriculum, which includes the student learning experience and the program context or environment in which the program is delivered. So we've added a commitment to anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for that to be across all of the areas of the implicit curriculum, which includes admission policies, advising, retention and termination, student participation and governance, and faculty and administrative structure and resources for the program. The intent here is to ensure that for the implicit curriculum, that the program has policies that are equitable and transparent, both in substance and in implementation. Okay, next slide. And then student development, we added content here, a program commitment to adequate resources for students from admission through graduation. That is to ensure the program's commitment for resources to be able to support that student through their educational process. And in the areas of the implicit curriculum that I already mentioned, that all of those policies should reflect the program's commitment to ADEI. Student development also includes things like career services, alumni services, networking and mentoring, licensure prep, community engagement and advocacy opportunities. This doesn't mean that programs need to start providing their own career services staff or alumni services staff, but universities and colleges tend to have career services supports alumni services support. So it can be ways in which you would link your program and your students to these existing structures. So the next one I want to mention that programs must ensure that BSW graduates do not repeat generalist content at the master's level. If you are following along with the EPAS draft, I would call your attention to AS 4.1.2. And that standard says the program offers advanced standing to graduates holding baccalaureate degrees from CSWE accredited programs and ensure that they do not repeat generalist content. So we've had the non-repetition of generalist content previously in 2015 EPAS. But this one is, so I just want to make sure people are aware of that, because you may have feedback about that. But it says that the MSW program offers advanced standing to graduates holding degrees, baccalaureate degrees or BSW degrees that are accredited. Okay, next slide. And then faculty. So we added content here. We're not able to specify percentages of categories of faculty and that sort of thing. But we did add language specifying that the program has appropriate and qualified faculty representing diverse perspectives, and that this is essential for developing an educational environment for the promotion of social work education for students. And in terms of minimum numbers of faculty, at the BSW level, this draft proposes the same as 2015 EPAS, a minimum of 2 full-time faculty whose principal assignment is to the BSW program. The next part is different because historically, or in 2015 EPAS, there was a minimum requirement for a minimum of 6 full-time faculty in MSW programs. This draft has reduced that to a minimum of 4 full-time faculty in an MSW program. So you may say, well, what was the rationale for that? And that was based on feedback that we've received, especially from smaller programs who might like to start an MSW program, not on a large scale, but a smaller scale with 4 faculty. Now, we heard opposing feedback as well, that some stakeholders are concerned about dropping that number from a minimum of 6 to a minimum of 4. So we welcome your feedback on that. And then the next bullet also is a bit different. The faculty to student ratio, 1 to 25, not just for BSW, but for BSW and MSW. And part of the reasoning around this with our joint committee and feedback we've had has been an effort to be more equitable across MSW and BSW education. And some people embrace that, other people are concerned about it. So again, we welcome your feedback because your feedback, we will look at that, and that will be, and we'll make data informed decisions based for the next draft based on that feedback. And then we've clarified that faculty teaching practice courses must have a master's degree in social work and at least 2 years post MSW, specifically social work practice experience. So we've just clarified that a bit as well. Okay, next slide. Administrative and governance structure under 4.3, that we've added language that the program fosters an administrative and leadership structure that reflects and affirms respect for ADEI, and that programs have equitable and inclusive policies and practices related to recruitment, hiring, promotion, and tenure of program personnel. Okay, next slide. And so this will be, I think, something of interest particularly to you as well, that both for field directors and for program directors. So I've just combined them on this slide. It's 4.3.4C for program directors, 4.3.5C for field director administrative time. So this has been revised. And the draft that we have says that the program director's time or the field director's time assigned to carry out the administrative functions and leadership related to field education or program direction. That now is in this draft commensurate with the program's full-time or FTE of students, so the student FTE. And that in terms of the assignment of the minimum assignment of time, a minimum of 25% assigned time in programs that have fewer than 100 student FTE, or a minimum of 50% assigned time for programs that have 100 or more or greater than 100 student FTE. So this is a little different in that it applies to BSW and MSW programs. You'll recall that under EPAS 2015, for field direction at the BSW level, there was a requirement for a minimum of 25% assigned time for field direction and leadership. And at the MSW level, there was a minimum requirement of 50%. And so we've had some feedback that why the difference, and some people feeling that that's inequitable. So we've tried again here in this standard to be more equitable. Okay, next slide. And I do see one, yeah, how's it different from 99 versus 101 students? That's a completely relevant point, you know, and there may be other ways that we'll need to think about this, but that's completely relevant whenever you sign a numeric threshold. So under assessment, 5.0 assessment. As before, it reflects the intentional and continuous improvement that is anchored in competency-based research and student learning outcomes, student learning experience, feedback, and with the professional practice community. So still, as before, in the explicit curriculum, one would assess the programs assess 2 measures for each competency. One of those measures must be field education. And then in the implicit curriculum, there's a requirement now that the implicit curriculum measurement must be an assessment of the program's efforts to foster ADEI in the student learning environment, whether that's you look specifically at advising or at your admission policies or your gatekeeping policies, distribution of resources and so on, but assessing that from an ADEI perspective. And then as before, you describe changes made in the program based on your assessment outcomes with linkages to the data for both explicit and implicit curricula. Okay, next slide. So a question that you may have, when will programs be required to use EPAS 2022? And let me say that the timeline for final approval of EPAS 2022 is at the June 2022 Commission on Accreditation meeting. So it won't be approved until then. Programs on the June 2025 agenda for reaffirmation, or if you're required, another way of thinking about it, if you're required to submit your self-study by August 1 of 24, then, or anytime after that, then programs must use the 2022 EPAS. Programs that are submitting self-studies prior to the June 25 COA agenda for reaffirmation review will have the option to stay with 2015 or to go ahead and move forward with adapting to the EPAS 2022 document. Okay, the next slide. So in closing, we want to once again really encourage you to go to the website and please submit in the survey your feedback, because all of those data, that feedback will be aggregated and will inform the Joint Committee about additional adjustments, changes that we need to make. That survey draft one in the survey will be open through May the 18th. So you've got plenty more time yet to take a look and to offer your feedback. And so we really want you to do that.